He wasn't trying to be liked. George Carlin didn't play nice. He played real, raw. He didn't sugarcoat the absurdity of the human race. He served it straight up, no chaser. And in a world overdosing on virtue signaling, emojis, and performative outrage, what Carlin said decades ago lands harder today than ever before. You see, Carlin wasn't just a comedian. He was a surgeon. His scalpel, language, his operating table, society. And the cancer he tried to cut out was hypocrisy, cultural decay, and the collective cowardice disguised as progress. But now, we're not even allowed to say the word cancer without offending someone. Welcome to the age of eggshells, where every conversation is a minefield and every opinion is potential ammunition. We live in a time where feelings are facts, offense is currency, and reality is negotiated like a used car. Carlin would have laughed his ass off and then incinerated the entire charade with a 7-minute monologue so sharp it could make glass bleed. See, he didn't care if you agreed. He cared if you thought. And that's the problem today. Thinking has become dangerous. Critical thinking is now hate speech. Nuance has been kidnapped and gagged in the basement of cultural dogma. If you say, "I'm not sure," you're an enemy. If you question, you're a bigot. If you observe, you're a traitor to the tribe. That's not progress. That's regression in a costume. It's intellectual fascism wrapped in rainbow flags and motivational quotes. The new totalitarianism doesn't wear jackboots. It wears Jordans and speaks in hashtags. Carlin once joked that Americans are full of it, and today we've made it a business model. Fake inclusivity, fake apologies, fake rage. Everything's a product now. Your trauma, monetized, your identity, packaged, your outrage, distributed. You don't even have to feel anything anymore. There's an app that'll do it for you. Post a black square, change your profile frame, cancel a stranger, and boom, you're a good person. No real action, no introspection. Just performance art. Social media activism is the participation trophy of moral engagement. Carlin saw it coming, the rise of the hollow human, loud, proud, and spiritually bankrupt. Empty vessels making the most noise, drowning out anyone with something substantial to say. He talked about euphemisms, how we replaced honest words with soft ones to cushion our egos. Now, we've industrialized that process. We don't die, we pass. We don't fire people, we right-size. We don't lie, we misspeak. Even war got a facelift. It's not bombing civilians, it's kinetic military action. And what used to be a man or woman is now a psychological landmine of 47 possible identities. None of it's about clarity. It's about avoiding accountability. The language has become a smokescreen to protect us from truth. And Carlin was allergic to bullshit. He could smell it from 3 counties away. Today, the culture doesn't want truth. It wants safety. But not the kind of safety that protects your life. The kind that protects your ego. Psychological bubble wrap for the emotionally fragile. Trigger warnings before lectures. Safe spaces from ideas. We're not preparing kids for life. We're preparing them for fantasy. They graduate with debt, no job, and a TikTok following that thinks they're influencers. And the real world slaps them so hard, their degree gets a concussion. Carlin would have laughed, then cried, then flipped the whole damn system upside down. Because he understood that coddling people doesn't make them stronger. And don't get me started on outrage. Back in Carlin's time, being offended was a personal problem. Now it's a business strategy. Offense has become a commodity traded on the stock exchange of social validation. People wake up and scroll their feed, hoping, no, praying, to find something that makes them mad. Why? Because it gives them meaning. In a world without faith, without purpose, outrage becomes a substitute for identity. Carlin warned us, when people stop thinking, they start reacting. And here we are, a society addicted to reaction. Pavlov's dogs, except we bark on Twitter and bite on Instagram. The irony is, Carlin couldn't survive today's comedy scene. He'd be labeled problematic, canceled before his mic even got hot. Because the gatekeepers of comedy now are emotion police with badges made of hurt feelings. And if your joke doesn't fit the script, they'll banish you. Never mind intent, never mind context, just guilt by vibe. Comedy has become therapeutic, not truth-telling. Comedians are now grief counselors with worse pay. Carlin believed comedy should offend. It should rattle cages. Today, we've got comedians doing apology tours and writing public statements for jokes that made someone cry into their oat milk. The revolution has been replaced by reputation management. And here's the most chilling part. People love it. Not just tolerate it, love it. They've been trained to mistake censorship for virtue, to confuse control with care, to believe that the removal of discomfort is the path to justice. But discomfort is where growth happens. That's where truth lives. That's where comedy punches hardest. Carlin knew this. That's why he never backed down. He didn't just tell jokes. He declared war on stupidity. He didn't want applause. He wanted awareness. He wanted people to think, not just laugh. Carlin predicted the infantilization of the adult mind, the rise of the overgrown child with a Wi-Fi connection and no sense of history. We've built a culture that rewards tantrums, platforms trauma, and sells identity like cereal. Everybody wants to be unique until it's time to think independently. Then suddenly, we're all reading from the same script. Diversity of appearance, uniformity of thought. That's not liberation. It's theatrical conformity with better lighting. We are now living in a time where people believe that words are violence, but actual violence is justifiable if your feelings are hurt. Property destruction is expression. Assault is activism. But saying the wrong pronoun? That's a hate crime. The scale of logic has been shattered and replaced with a carnival mirror. And in the fun house of feelings, Carlin would have been the guy with a sledgehammer, breaking mirrors and demanding we look at ourselves clearly for once. Because he understood that self-reflection was more important than self-protection. That truth was more valuable than comfort. He hated groups. Not people, groups. Because groups think in slogans. People think in silence. The moment you join a mob, your brain goes on airplane mode and your mouth hits autopilot. That's how good people end up cheering for madness. Carlin knew the individual was sacred, but the herd was dangerous. And today's herd, digitally enhanced, algorithmically fed, addicted to dopamine, worshipping fake heroes and screaming into echo chambers. The herd mentality has gone viral, spreading faster than any actual virus ever could, and the symptoms are intellectual blindness and moral deafness. What Carlin warned us about wasn't just cultural decay, it was spiritual amnesia. We forgot who we are. We replaced soul with brand, depth with aesthetics, wisdom with trends. He wasn't trying to save us. He was trying to wake us up. And if he were alive today, he wouldn't be shocked. He'd be validated and probably banned on every major platform before lunchtime. Because Carlin understood something that we've forgotten. The truth isn't always pleasant, but it's always necessary. He knew that comfort and growth were incompatible, that safety and freedom were often opposites. He watched as language became a weapon instead of a tool, as words became landmines instead of stepping stones, as communication became performance instead of connection. Today's culture treats disagreement like domestic violence. Debate is now abuse. Questioning is harassment. Having an unpopular opinion isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. It's literally violence, according to the new theology of feelings. Carlin would have marveled at how we've managed to make thinking a form of assault, how curiosity became bigotry, how asking why became a hate crime. The inmates have taken over the asylum, and they're all therapists now. We've created a society where the most important qualification for speaking is not intelligence, not experience, not wisdom. It's victimhood. The more oppressed you are, the more truth you're allowed to speak. Except the truth isn't determined by suffering. Truth is determined by reality. And reality doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't apologize. It just is. Carlin knew this. That's why he was so dangerous to the feelings police. He refused to genuflect at the altar of emotional fragility. He wouldn't bow to the gods of psychological safety. He understood that toughness wasn't toxic. Weakness was. That resilience wasn't privilege, it was necessity. The education system has become a factory for producing emotional invalids. Kids graduate knowing 73 different gender pronouns, but can't balance a checkbook. They can identify microaggressions, but can't identify countries on a map. They're experts in trauma theory, but illiterate in history. They know all about their rights, but nothing about their responsibilities. They're fluent in victim language, but can't speak solution. Carlin would have looked at this generation and seen the end result of his warnings. The coddled becoming the controlling, the protected becoming the persecutors, the victims becoming the victimizers. Because when you raise people to believe they're entitled to comfort, they become tyrants when they encounter discomfort. When you tell people they're fragile, they become dangerous when they feel threatened. Social media has turned everyone into their own personal dictator. Everyone's got a platform, and everyone's got an opinion, and everyone thinks their opinion is a fact, and everyone thinks their fact is the only truth. The democratization of voice has led to the tyranny of noise. Everyone's talking, nobody's listening. Everyone's offended, nobody's thinking. Everyone's a victim, nobody's responsible. Carlin saw this coming when he talked about the narcissism epidemic. The me generation becoming the only me generation. Where individual experience became universal truth. Where personal feelings became public policy. We've created a culture where emotional incontinence is mistaken for authenticity. Where having no filter is confused with being genuine. Where oversharing is thought to be vulnerability. But real vulnerability requires courage. Real authenticity requires self-awareness. Real genuineness requires honesty, including the honesty to admit when you're wrong. And this culture has forgotten how to be wrong. Being wrong has become shameful instead of educational. Making mistakes has become proof of inadequacy instead of evidence of humanity. Learning has become threatening instead of liberating. Carlin understood that being human meant being flawed, that growth meant acknowledging imperfection, that wisdom came from embracing uncertainty, not eliminating it. But we've built a world that demands perfection from imperfect beings, that expects certainty from uncertain minds, that requires complete knowledge from incomplete information. And when people can't meet these impossible standards, they either break down or lash out. They either become depressed or become angry. They either retreat into themselves or attack everyone else. The middle ground has been eliminated. Nuance has been murdered. Complexity has been canceled. Everything is either perfect or evil. Everyone is either a hero or a villain. There's no in-between anymore. Carlin lived in the in-between. He thrived in the gray areas. He found truth in the contradictions. He understood that life was messy, people were complicated, and simple answers were usually wrong. But simple answers are all we want now. Binary thinking for binary times. Us versus them. Good versus evil. Right versus wrong. No complexity allowed. No contradictions permitted. This is what happens when a society stops thinking and starts feeling. When logic becomes secondary to emotion. When reason becomes subordinate to reaction. When truth becomes less important than comfort. Carlin would have laughed at our inability to handle complexity, at our need for everything to be explained in 280 characters or less, at our addiction to certainty in an uncertain world. He would have mocked our trigger warnings and safe spaces, not because he was cruel, but because he understood that life doesn't come with trigger warnings. Reality doesn't provide safe spaces. The world is harsh, unfair, and indifferent. Preparing people for a kinder, gentler world that doesn't exist isn't compassion. It's cruelty. It's setting them up for failure, disappointment, and rage. Carlin knew that comedy was supposed to prepare people for life's hardships, not protect them from life's realities. Laughter was supposed to be medicine, not morphine. Humor was supposed to heal, not hide. But we've turned comedy into therapy, comedians into counselors, laughter into a form of group hug. We've domesticated something that was supposed to be wild, tamed something that was supposed to be dangerous. And in doing so, we've lost something essential. We've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves, to find humor in our own absurdity, to recognize our own contradictions and hypocrisies. Instead, we can only laugh at others, at those who are different, at those who disagree, at those who dare to think differently. Our humor has become a weapon, not a mirror. Carlin used humor as a mirror. He held it up to society and said, "Look at yourself. Look at what you've become. Look at what you're doing." And people looked, and they laughed, and sometimes they changed. But now we're afraid to look in the mirror. We're terrified of what we might see. So we've broken all the mirrors and blamed the glass for cutting us. We've shot the messengers and canceled the message. The result is a society that's lost touch with reality. That's living in a fantasy of their own creation. That's confusing their emotions with the truth, their feelings with facts, their opinions with reality. And when reality inevitably intrudes, as it always does, they're shocked, outraged, and traumatized. Because nobody prepared them for the truth. Everyone protected them from it instead. Carlin would have seen this as the ultimate tragedy. Not the corruption of politics or the decline of culture or the rise of stupidity, but the loss of our ability to face reality, to handle truth, to deal with life as it actually is. Because at the end of the day, that's all he ever asked of us. Not to agree with him, not to like him, not to follow him, just to think, to question, to face reality with our eyes open and our minds engaged. To stop hiding behind euphemisms and excuses, to stop pretending that feelings were more important than facts, to stop acting like comfort was more valuable than truth. He asked us to grow up, to toughen up, to wake up, and instead, we've chosen to give up, to shut up, to cover up. We've chosen the easy path over the right path, the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. And in doing so, we've proven every prediction he ever made, validated every warning he ever gave, confirmed every fear he ever expressed. We've become exactly what he said we would become. The question is, what would Carlin do now? Would he keep fighting? Would he keep talking? Would he keep trying to wake us up? Or would he finally give up on a society that's given up on itself? I think he'd keep fighting. Not because he thought he could win, but because the fight itself was worth it. Because truth was worth defending, even when nobody wanted to hear it. Because reality was worth preserving, even when everyone preferred the fantasy. That's the Carlin legacy, not the jokes or the routines or the specials, but the refusal to surrender to stupidity, the commitment to truth over comfort, the dedication to reality over fantasy. And if there's any hope for us, any chance of recovery, it starts with remembering what Carlin taught us. That thinking is not optional, that truth is not negotiable, that reality is not up for debate. The choice is ours. We can keep living in the fantasy, or we can wake up to the reality. We can keep protecting our feelings, or we can start protecting our minds. We can keep being offended, or we can start being educated. George Carlin gave us the tools. The question is, do we have the courage to use them? Do we have the strength to face the truth? Do we have the wisdom to choose reality over comfort? The answer will determine not just our future, but our humanity. Because in the end, that's what Carlin was really fighting for. Not just our right to think, but our willingness to be human, flawed, complicated, contradictory, but ultimately real. And real is all we've got. It's all we've ever had. It's all we'll ever need. If we're brave enough to face it, if we're strong enough to handle it, if we're wise enough to choose it. That's the Carlin prophecy. Not a prediction of doom, but a call to action, a challenge to grow up, a demand to wake up, a plea to never give up on the truth. Because the truth is all we have, and if we lose that, we lose everything, including ourselves.